Hi, I'm Arlen. Nice to meet you or see you again, as the case may be. I told you I was going to get some training in for you on demand. And so let's get into live mode. Okay. There are three things you have to do in order to make live work, and two of them are really easy. So the first one is in your settings menu, you're going to come into advanced modes and you're going to make sure live is clicked on. Easy enough. That's step one. Close that. You also want to make sure in layout that live mode, which is do it, is clicked on. And once that do it is clicked on, you can just close this, close. There you go. Step two. Really easy, those two, right? Okay. So the third thing is then you have to make sure, I'm going to click back, and you have to make sure that anything that has options in it, every step. So here I have 15 steps. Not all the steps are going to have choices on them, but any step that does, you're going to have to go into advanced and highlight alternatives. Okay, so in here, the first step is I want you to click settings. That's not a choice, so I don't have to do the alternatives. Live, down. And then I'm going to come back and explain what these things are in a minute. Okay, just show you how to do this. All of these are, now this would be a choice. So I want to highlight alternatives, click enable, and then you're going to have to put in a message in case somebody makes a mistake or needs more information. Okay, so I'm going to be explaining this part later, but I put a message in that as a guide, some of the, if it's URL contains, you might need something, URL is. I'll explain what all of those are in a minute, but I just put a note in there. And then I'm going to go to the next slide. Enter keywords. I don't need to make a choice there or there. Now here I have a choice again. Highlight alternatives and type in a message. And again, this is what I will explain in a little bit. And move on. Here I've gone into a doc instead of the one that I was in prior. Show you some more options. So remember, go into the settings, advanced mode. I have live clicked. I'm going to go into layout, visibility, do it as clicked. That's step two. Step three is going back in and checking if my steps have alternatives that need to be highlighted. So in here, click the template you want to use. So I've got all of those templates. I'm going to have to go into advanced, click highlights alternative, enable it, and here is a message that I typed in. And then I'm going to go and see if there's any more. This is select text. It's grayed out. I don't have a choice. It's telling me this is not one where I need to highlight alternatives. Click a text color, highlight alternatives. Well, in this case, I don't need to because that is the button that I want them to click. Even though that says it's available, that's because I have all those menu items. It doesn't know that's the one that I want to click. Okay. And so this one, though, obviously, alternatives highlighted, you're going to need that because when this gets posted, all these little dots are going to have little squares around them so that people can choose whatever color they want. And then that's it. So I'm going to show you what it looks like live. Go to try it, do it, and go live.
The first step is to open Google Docs and click the arrows next to Template Gallery. Scroll down and click the template you want to use. Scroll and select the text you want to change. Click text color. Click the color you want to choose.
Now, in this case, I think these were paler and they didn't show up. I'm not sure why. If it was something I did, I'm not sure. I'm just going to click on a color for now and I'll worry about what happened later. You know that people are going to be able to choose whatever color they want. It's just that some of the boxes aren't colored.
That's it. You're done.
Going back into settings in your dashboard. So those choices that I made, you're going to go into advanced modes. On available on, it's available at this address. And this is captured. This is the address that is your step one. Whatever you're doing on step one, if it's going to be live, that is the address that it's capturing. And so that's the most important thing, is that you are capturing it in the one that on which you want to go live. So when I click on this, and I have my choice, google.com. Well, I wouldn't obviously want this to open up just anywhere in Google. I want it on docs.google.com, and that's where I captured it. But also you've got subdomains. And in this case, subdomains in presentations, for example, you might want it, if it was in slides, not to open in docs.google.com. But it's really more for things like Power School or Canvas, where you have maybe admin.google.com or parents.google.com or students.google.com, so that if you only want it to be able to open in a certain domain, that's when that would be used, that you could put in a subdomain specifically. It only really makes sense when you have to restrict what domain it's going to open in. Also, remember, when you pick this parent domain, that would be across the board. So if you have anything Google, it would show up on, whereas you want it to show up in Docs, that's probably also where you captured it. If you ever find that the domain and subdomain are the same, for instance, if I were doing this for iorad, this would say iorad.com, and this one would say www.iorad.com, because we don't have subdomains. Don't let me confuse you here. There's nothing you can change here. This is just a choice menu. You can choose what level. If you need to change something, that's a totally different screen, but this is just a choice level, okay? So if you want to change something, going to come back up, and you're going to come into this URL contains. URL contains is just like this heading up here. This could say URL contains, and then this would say choose one. So when you pull down your arrow, these are really only your two choices, that the URL is or URL contains. This is just a heading. This just takes you back out. If I need to change the URL, it was here, and I click URL is, it comes up with the URL that you're going to use. And if you need to change that, then I would backspace out of here, highlight and backspace. And then I might type and say, I want this to be instead in Gmail or mail.google.com. And then that changes that. Did you see how that instantly changed? You can click back and do it again. I'll put the old one back in for a second. See, it took it back to Docs. That is automatically populated depending what you put here. So if you found that your live tutorial isn't being pulled up on the right site, you can always put in a URL value there. Okay, so that's the available on. I'm going to close this for a second and go to URL contains. Now, if I wanted this, docs.google.com, you'll see, say, for example, in slides and presentations, if I type the word presentations here, it will only come up with Google Slides, because those URLs say docs.google.com/presentations. So I wanted to see if I could clarify that or summarize it. The URL is going to put this available on in here, and the URL contains is, if it says docs.google.com, that means it could show up on Sheets, it could show up on Slides. Just because of the way their URLs are, it would be a /sheets/presentations. So I wanted to make sure that you understand that the contains adds to this main URL, and they is, if you needed to change it from Docs to something else because it doesn't work in Docs. You've tried it live and it's opening in the wrong spot. And so you're going to put the URL in that you want it to open in. You're basically changing the first steps capture URL. So this is docs.google.com. That's fine. There's really no reason to change the URL is. That would be if I really wanted it on another program. So if I wanted it to show up on iorad or something like that. What you really want to use is, you can see this says document, but if I want it to be on presentations instead and it's showing up through docs.google.com, the easiest thing to do then would be go to URL contains and type in presentations there, because then docs.google.com is correct. I just want it on presentations or slides instead. So again, just to summarize, you're going to have three things that you need to do. You're going to have the advanced modes, live. You're going to have layout, visibility, do it. You're going to have back, highlight alternatives, and alternatives highlighted when you have multiple things to choose. 1, 2, 3. The only other thing that I explained in this is in advanced modes. If, for instance, it's going to docs.google.com, but you want it to go somewhere else, my recommendation is come into URL contains and add presentations or spreadsheets for sheets.google.com. You'll see when you open up their URL, that will be up in the URL. It'll be docs.google.com/spreadsheets for sheets. And that's really the only place you need to change it in live. I didn't want to confuse you with the others, but I want to explain what all of that is. You asked, I'm telling. So the only one you need, I'm going to close this for a second, is when you go to advanced modes. If it's not capturing in the right spot when you try it in live, you really can just add the thing that's in their URL to presentations or spreadsheets or whatever. That will take it directly to that Google product as opposed to Docs. And it'll open in the right spot then. So since I've thoroughly confused you, you know where to find me. You can get me on Slack, arlen@iorad.com. I hope this helped. Ask me any questions that you need, and I'll see you online.